I stand in the city of Jerusalem, the holiest place in the world, sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and much later in history to Islam. This is also center stage for a war started when the terrorist organization Hamas perpetrated a brutal massacre against primarily Israeli citizens. This murderous attack saw the most Jews slaughtered in a single day since the Holocaust. Approximately 1,200 killed, including many women, children, and elderly, all unarmed, as well as over 4,000 wounded. Approximately 250 civilians were kidnapped and, as evidenced by video, beaten, brutalized, and thrown into inhospitable imprisonment, to say the least. It's believed that there are still 132 hostages currently in Hamas captivity, although it is unknown how many are actually alive. This war is between Israel, the Jewish homeland, and Hamas, a terrorist group that has taken over the territory known as the Gaza Strip, which Israel gave up in a goodwill effort for peace in 2005. Occupied by Palestinians, many of whom willingly harbor the terrorists or are at least sympathizers. Others are clearly trapped in a bad situation. This unprovoked October 7th genocide and Israel's predictable response is also dividing the world, as evidenced by the out-of-control protests seen on too many college campuses across America. I was present on the UCLA campus recently speaking with Jewish students and Israeli Jewish students throughout the day and for the takedown of the pro-Palestinian encampment late into the night. Masquerading as exercising their right to free speech, these UCLA protesters, along with others on campuses across the nation, have resorted to threats, intimidation, and physical assault to suppress pro-Israeli counterparts. Going even deeper into the roots of this story dominating the world stage, tonight I sit down for a no-holds-barred, in-depth interview with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, unedited and commercial-free from Jerusalem. An interview taking place at perhaps the most critical time in this conflict. A conflict with implications the world over. Prime Minister, thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. Welcome to Israel.
Well, I'm so proud to be here, and I've been spending a lot of time talking about Israel, so to be here and to have the honor of sitting with you is amazing. How do you think the Israeli people are holding up 7 months into this conflict?
They're holding up incredibly well. They're very strong. They're united. They understand that we face a genocidal enemy that we have to defeat in order to assure our future. It's not only Hamas monsters that we face the whole Iran terror axis that openly declares its goal to destroy everything you see around, to destroy us, to effect another Holocaust, and that's not going to happen. We have the strength of ages here.
Well, I want to talk about that and talk about Iran in a minute, but when we talk about Hamas, we're clearly talking about a terror group. Mm-hmm. This is not a government, it's a militia, a terrorist group.
Yes, there are also terror governments like Iran, but this is a smaller version. In its charter it says, kill every Jew on earth, everywhere you find him. If a Jew hides behind a bush, find him, kill him. It's actually said that in the charter.
I've read the charter and it does say exactly that.
Said exactly that. And these people are particularly brutal and savage. I mean, what they did on October 7th is incredible. They murdered innocent men and women. They raped women and beheaded them. They burned babies alive. They took hostages, men, women, little boys, babies. And then they broadcasted it live, GoPro. They were proud of their, of their savagery. I have to say that this is the worst savagery that the Jewish people experienced since the Holocaust.
Well, there were certainly more Jews killed that day than since the Holocaust in one day.
In one day, you're right.
And which is stunning to me how short the memory is for what happened that day in the media in terms of what's going on. And I want to change that. I want to remind people and I don't want to be sensationalistic about it, but I want to remind people the brutality of what happened that day. And along those lines, I have a question. Are the Palestinian people at large complicit in this? How do you tell the difference between Hamas and Palestinians in the Gaza Strip? Because Hamas doesn't wear a uniform. They hide among the civilians. They hide in schools. They hide in churches. They wear civilian clothes, which is a violation of the Geneva Convention. Are Palestinians complicit in this, or are they just hiding among them? I know they're doing that, but are Palestinians, some, complicit in this?
You have actually both conditions, because we went into buildings, residential buildings, where these terrorists, hide, and where they shoot from. They go to hospitals, schools, residential areas. But when we went into these residential areas, we found tablets, and in the tablet you have, you open the tablet and you see a picture of Adolf Hitler. And then in another building you see a picture, in another apartment you see text of Hitler's Mein Kampf, which is the work that itemized and laid the plan for the destruction of the 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. So they're immersed in this. They educate their children to this unfathomable hatred of Jews, to this murderous mentality, and many comply with it. And those who don't, they're used as human shields anyway. They use them as human shields, and they target civilians, and they hide behind their civilians, their own civilians. They target ours, hide behind theirs. That is a double war crime. And of course, this makes Israel's task so much more difficult. No army has faced in the world the task we have, to have 35,000, 40,000 terrorists, armed terrorists in a dense urban area, 50 meters sometimes above ground, 50 meters below ground. They've taken hostages. They say they'll murder them. They have. And then you have to wean them out. No armies face that. Not in Fallujah, not in Mosul. I asked a great military historian in West Point. He said, the only parallel that I can give is the battle for Manila, where U.S. forces there were 17,000 Japanese troops, there were 1,000 hostages, there were underground tunnels, the Manila sewage system. It was smaller than what we have in Gaza. But the Americans fought and fought bravely and eventually defeated the Japanese. But they ended up killing 100,000 civilians, not because MacArthur, who commanded them, wanted to. He didn't want to.
Right.
But because when you hide in dense civilian areas, that's what happens. Israel has not had this kind of ratio. We've had a much smaller ratio, because we take unbelievable efforts, pamphlets, phone calls, text messages to the people, give up the element of surprise, and we say, please leave the area because we're going to go after the terrorists. If you are ensconced with terrorists, leave the areas. And that's why the ratio, actually, contrary to everything you read in the mainstream media, the ratio of civilians killed to terrorists killed in that Gaza war is perhaps the smallest it's been in any urban battle in modern history.
Well, how do you handle the criticism and maintain your confidence in your decisions? Because we've seen the media swing. After October 7th, people were appalled at what happened. And I've seen video that most of the world hasn't seen of what happened that day, in concert with the IDF, provided me that so I could speak firsthand, not just hearsay, but firsthand of what I had seen. And so they brought me under careful security, footage that I've seen. But most of the world hasn't seen that, and the media has swung around, and you've been criticized for civilian deaths because they hide among them. How do you maintain the confidence of your decisions and not question your decision making and the confidence in those decisions when there's so much criticism from some of the media and world leaders?
Well, look, I say to the international community, you can't, on the one hand, speak of Israel's right to exercise self-defense, to protect itself, and self-defense always involves both offense and defense. You can't talk about Israel's right of self-defense and then oppose Israel using it. You can't say we agree that Hamas has to be destroyed and then oppose Israel when it sets out to destroy Hamas. You can't hold the Israeli army to standards of avoiding civilian casualties that no army is held to in the world, when actually Israel is doing everything that no other army has done to avoid civilian casualties. You can't do that. So, you know, you have to say, are we going to succumb to their hypocrisy? Are we going to basically remain defenseless and not destroy the Hamas terrorist army there? Because if we do not destroy them, if we leave them alone, they'll come back. They'll emerge from the tunnels, they'll take over Gaza again, and they'll do what they promised to do. They said, we'll do October 7th, this enormous massacre, again and again and again. So we have no choice.
Well, you speak to world leaders. I know you, behind closed doors, you have private conversations. Have you spoken to a world leader that does not agree that Hamas has to be taken down? First, that they're a terrorist group and that they have to be taken down. Is there a world leader that you've spoken to that does not agree with that?
They agree with it. Many of them agree with it privately. And then when they're faced with the, the pressure of all this propaganda, all this madness in the campuses and in the various capitals of the West, they begin to fray, some of them. But I don't fray. I have to do what we have to do to protect ourselves and to make sure that these atrocities are not repeated. People should know what these atrocities were. You know, I went a few days after the massacre, I went to one of the communities right next to the Gaza Strip where these monsters entered. They found there a dark room, and they saw a cluster of forms in the darkness. And when they lit the room, they found a family burned to death, crouched like this. You have the mother and the father trying to protect their two little children, and the grandfather on top of them, all burnt. There was these monsters, when they came into the homes, one of the mothers wanted to hide their children, like Anne Frank, in the attic. So there was a secret attic, and these savages came in, killed the parents, found the latch where these two little children were hiding with terror in their eyes, and they came in and they slaughtered them. This is savagery on an unimaginable scale, and they vow to repeat it again and again. And I ask world leaders, what would you do? Let me ask you, what would America do? Dr. Phil, here's the proportion, okay? It's as if you had 30 9/11s in one day. As if you had 40,000 Americans butchered, 10,000 Americans held hostage, and they promised to do it again and again. What do you think America would do?
Well, we know what the president said that time. He said, "Let's roll. Let's go get the bad."
Well, we know what you did after Pearl Harbor.
Right.
We know what you did after 9/11, and you know that you took action because you had to roll back this kind of attack on you. Well, we do too. The difference is, of course, that this is not an attack thousands of miles away from our homes. This is an attack which is a 50-minute ride from here, from Jerusalem.